We usually bring a laptop to Computex for video editing purposes because there's a 12-hour flight involved, we're going overseas, but a laptop is little more than a heavily neutered desktop, shrunk down to fit within thermal constraints, clock speeds reduced, limited expandability. All of this is totally unacceptable, and for that reason, and not because none of our sponsors this year actually make laptops that have one for us to borrow, we have decided to build a small form factor PC that we'll be bringing along to Computex to handle the bulk of the video editing work, and that is what we're building today, featuring the Thermaltake TR100WS, now with wood.
Excellent!
Today's video is brought to you by the Paul's Hardware store on paulshardware.net, the only official source for Paul's Hardware merchandise, tantalizing t-shirts, brilliant beer sets, high-quality hoodies, and more, all featuring the classic thumbscrew for tasteful and refined viewers, or the 8-bit thumbscrew for tasteful and refined viewers who hate curves. New designs are added sporadically and at random, so head over to paulshardware.net and get some of that sweet, sweet merch right now. Or not right now, after you watch the video. Either way.
So here are the parts for our epic small form factor mobile video editing PC. Many of these parts were chosen because I already had them on hand and available because, you know, we don't want to be buying a memory kit right now, and I happen to have a 96 gig G.Skill Ripjaws M5 kit right here. I know it's an XMP kit and not Expo, but the capacity is what we're really after, which is also why this is the one component in this build that isn't going to match as well with the others, because that's really the only white component in this build, but G.Skill is also a sponsor, so a big thank you to them for their support this year. Cooler Master is also a sponsor, and while we don't have any Cooler Master components in this build, I grabbed this USB thumb drive because I thought, you know, we got to represent Cooler Master as well. Plus, it's got really good cooling on this USB thumb drive, if you guys didn't notice. But what's important for a video editing PC is going to be memory, of course. We need a very beefy memory kit. We also need as many cores and threads in the CPU as possible. So for that, we have the AMD Ryzen 9 9950X CPU. If I was building this to be a true crossover system where I wanted to do video editing as well as gaming, I'd go with the 9950X 3D CPU instead. But that CPU is currently installed on one of my test beds, so we're going with the non-X3D option. And then you've got storage, and for storage, we are also using drives that I already had. We want multiple drives for an operating system, a drive for our RAWs, a drive for a scratch disk, so we have a 2 terabyte WD Black. It's the SN850X, and then we've got two 4 terabyte drives. We got the 1090 Pro from Lexar here, which is a 4 terabyte Gen 5 drive. Then we've got the NM790 right here, which is a PCIe Gen 4 drive, but still very fast. And if you can't tell, this drive was pulled from a previous video editing system, and it's already got a bunch of our raw files and stuff, some assets from previous show coverage, so that's going to be helpful to have on hand too. For our motherboard, we needed Mini ITX form factor, we needed AM5 to be compatible with our CPU, and I wanted as many M.2 slots as possible, ideally 3, and this is really the only board that kind of meets all those criteria. The B650i Aorus Ultra. I know it's a 600 series motherboard, not an 800 series, but really those use the same chipset anyway, so the only real difference between those boards, other than the features they ship with, is the 600 versus 800 in the model name. So that should allow us to connect a lot of M.2 NVMe storage without needing a larger form factor system. For our video card, we've got an RTX 5080. We wanted more VRAM on the graphics card, so the 5080 has 16 gigs. The upgrade from this will be like a 5090, but there really isn't one that's going to fit properly in this case. Yes, there are some AMD options out there, but for quick compatibility with our editing software, an NVIDIA card is a little bit of a better option. And lastly, we have our Thermaltake components, the TR100WS case, a nice small form factor case that also fits, you know, like up to a 280mm AIO in the top. Plenty of room for larger size graphics cards, and we actually have support for a lot of that too, since we're pairing that with the Tough Power SFX 1000 watt power supply. This is a little bit overkill for our 5080, to be perfectly honest, but nice to have a little bit of a headroom there, and it's 80+ platinum rated, as well as being fully modular. And yes, it's got the 12V2x6 connectors as well. Then lastly, we need a cooler for our CPU, so we've got the TH280V2 ARGB Sync, 280mm AIO. Since we're going to be shipping this system or putting it on a plane, I much prefer an AIO for that because large air coolers can bounce around a lot and they're not as safe for transportation. And also, since we have a high core count CPU, having better cooling is going to help out with that as well. But I mentioned a few times that we're going to be taking the system all the way to Taiwan, and if you guys are wondering, like, are you just going to be chucking it in your luggage in a suitcase or something like that? The answer there is no. I've got a couple flight cases down here, so that's one of the first things we're going to need to test is, will the TR100 case fit into ideally the smaller one because it's got wheels and stuff, but if not that, it should hopefully at least fit in that big one. Whenever I do a build, I like to take a closer look at the case. This is a Thermaltake TR100 though, and I have built in this case before. The main difference here is this is the wood series, so it has this sort of maple finish wood going across the front, and in case you didn't notice, this is also the Matcha green finish of the TR100. The Thermaltake wood series these, they've expanded to sort of add these wood accents to a lot of the different cases that they make. For reasons I cannot fully explain, for the TR100, the smallest case, they decided to go with Matcha green right out of the gate. So this is actually the only color that the Wood Series TR100 is available in. But I'm pretty sure they're going to be expanding this and launching it in other colors as well. But what I'm trying to show you here is some of the functionality of the case, like easily removable side panels, these magnetic dust filters that snap into place, so that's going to provide dust filtration, but also pretty easy to clean out. This is an accessory box, and this case uses the sort of two-chamber layout that is popular with many small form factor cases in this size range. So on this side of the case is actually where the graphics card goes. This is where the back side of the motherboard would be, and it comes with a riser cable so you can position your GPU over on this side. So triple slot GPU is about the most you would want to install in this case. And then I'm thinking if we're gonna put this in with checked luggage, we're probably gonna put some extra foam in there to keep anything from bumping around too much in transit. On the other side, removing this side panel, we have the chamber where the motherboard sits, so motherboard, CPU, all that stuff. We're gonna have a lot of setup to do with that particular part of the build. And the power supply mount is right here, and as I recall from doing a build in this for CES 2025, our AIO is gonna be at the top, and we will route the tubes down this area to meet up with the CPU socket right over there. Other cool features I like about this case are this cutout on the bottom that actually lets you access the on-off switch for your power supply, which is nice. And then with a couple captive thumb screws, you can actually remove the entire bottom piece, or I would be able to if it didn't have this zip tie. So you can pull that off all the way, and you can pull this top piece off all the way. So for a small form factor build in particular, where things can get pretty tight and pretty cramped, being able to access your motherboard from any particular side to tuck cables in, plug things in where necessary, having this level of access, especially with easable removable panels, is super nice. Also, this top panel here has an LCD option, so you can swap that out, and the LCD is an add-on piece. We're not going to be installing one of those today. And front panel connectivity and I/O, power button, reset button, a couple USB 3.0s, and a Type-C, which we will be able to use since we have that connector on our motherboard. So a big part of this build is going to be motherboard setup. This motherboard is pretty interesting, actually. It's got a daughter board over here, for example, which includes 4 SATA ports, like an RGB header, your front panel headers. It also makes use of little dongle connections in quite a few places that allows them to use slightly smaller connectors on the motherboard itself, but it means you need to connect a little dongle extension in order to plug in certain things. So this little extension, for example, lets you plug in a standard PWM fan, and this little extension here lets you plug in your front panel connectors, which Gigabyte is still color coding inside there at least. Then we also have this section underneath the CPU socket. Well, we also have some little peely things to peel off. So this has an active fan for some cooling over dual M.2 slots, which are stacked underneath there. And then flipping the board over, we actually have a back plate, which I would say is pretty unique. You don't often see these on like B series motherboards like the B650. So while I do appreciate a back plate, we are going to need to remove this back plate in order to get at our third M.2 slot, which is mounted on the rear of the board. So because motherboards don't ship with full manuals anymore, I had to look up online to double check to make sure that we're installing our M.2s in the right place. I made a post-it note so I can be absolutely sure. And Joe requested that if we can save him some time by putting in an SSD that already has Windows on it, that might help too. So our 2 terabyte drive has Windows installed on it. That and our 4 terabyte backups drive are both PCI Express Gen 4, and then our NM1090 Pro is actually Gen 5. So we want this to go in the dedicated Gen 5 slot. That one's actually labeled M2B on the PCB, and then M2A is the Gen 4 slot. Both of those run off the CPU, so we're actually gonna be running the GPU at by 8 instead of by 16, but that's fine. And then the final M.2 slot actually runs off of the chipset, and that is the one on the back of the board that we have exposed now by removing that back panel. The back plate is just held on by some Phillips head screws, so it wasn't too tough to remove. So this second little daughter board that holds the M.2 slots is labeled, and the M2B is actually this one, the upper one with the quick release catch on it. So that's where our Gen 5 drive is gonna go. And then you guys let me know if you think this is the right choice or not. I'm gonna put the 4 terabyte Gen 4 drive in the A slot, which is actually the Gen 4 slot. That's on the bottom of this. And then our operating system drive, the 2 terabyte, is gonna go on the back of the board, and that will be in the chipset connected M.2 slot. And there it is, the finished build. Everything came together very nicely, I would say, in our little TR100 Wood Series case. The biggest dilemma, of course, is what to call this. Joe has named it the Gremlin because of its green sheen, but then I forgot that he had named it the Gremlin, and when I set up Windows on it, I called it Woody. So let us know in the comments which name you prefer, or if you have a unique name, feel free to share it with us. We might change it up in the future. In terms of the assembly process, since I have built in the TR100 before, everything was very smooth. Again, as I mentioned as we were going over the case, just the ability to easily remove all the panels from the top, bottom, and all the sides, especially to get at like little connector points on the motherboard that might have been inaccessible otherwise, is a very key feature of this case and allows you to build a mini ITX system with, I would say, significantly less pain than many other SFF cases that are out there. So moving on to our next steps, we're going to be taking this to Computex to do the bulk of our video editing. Windows is installed. All three of our drives are immediately recognized, so there's just a little bit more software setup to do. In the meantime, though, we have to figure out how to get this from here to Taipei. So let me shut it down for just a second so we can do a little test fit. So to answer the question from the beginning of the video, will this fit into my flight case? The answer is yes. Yes, it totally will. I would of course need to add some more foam, but I do have plenty of that. But as you can see, lid closes. This is the flight case that was sent to me for the AMD Ryzen Threadripper launch, many years back, by the way. However, upon further consideration and taking stock of the luggage that we will be bringing to Taipei, if we were to put this in with the checked things, we would need to be very careful that it can survive being tossed around, which would mean we would probably want to pack the GPU area in particular with some additional foam just to provide some padding in there. But we realized that since this tiny little PC can easily fit, in this case, it could easily fit into a carry-on bag, and that's probably going to be our best bet. If we put it in a carry-on, then we can make sure that as we are maneuvering it around, we are being delicate and careful. So just to do a proof of concept for the carry-on option, ta-da, it fits great. And again, with the carry-on, since we can be very careful with it, we don't need to worry quite as much about packing and padding and stuff. We'll probably toss a towel in there, maybe some undies, the whites. It's a Big Lebowski reference. But okay, that is our plan for Computex, for video editing. We still need to sort out the monitor situation, so there are still some unanswered questions, but we'll be figuring those out over the course of the next week or so. So if you're not already subscribed, consider doing that so you can get notified when our Computex coverage goes up. We're going to be visiting lots of different vendors in Taipei, Taiwan. A huge thank you to Thermaltake for sending over the case, the power supply, and the all-in-one liquid cooler to get this build put together on fairly short notice. I'll post links to all the parts that I used down in the description below. Thank you guys very much for watching this video. We'll see you all in the next one.